Black women paid for first class, but a stranger stole her seat and the flight crew told her to move. What happened next? A quiet showdown that stopped the plane, shocked every passenger, and sent a powerful message across the world. This isn't just a travel story, it's a lesson in dignity, power, and knowing your worth. That's what Michelle Carter thought as she stood in front of seat 2A first class, prime window seat, legroom for days, boarding pass still in hand, suitcase neatly stowed above. The flight had already been delayed once. She was looking forward to a quiet, peaceful flight. But instead, her calm was interrupted by an unexpected obstacle. A sharply dressed white man, wearing designer sunglasses, noise-canceling headphones, and a smug expression, was already lounging in her seat. Legs crossed. Arm draped casually over the divider. Michelle paused. Maybe it was just a simple mix-up. She smiled politely and gently tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said. "I believe that's my seat." The man slowly pulled down his headphones, looked up at her, then let out a short laugh. "Yeah, nope. Not anymore," he replied, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Michelle blinked, taken aback. "I'm sorry?" He motioned to the seat next to him. "Take that one. You'll be fine." Now she was sure he misunderstood. Michelle lifted her phone, showing him the boarding pass. "Seat 2A. That's me." The man didn't even glance at the screen. Instead, he waved dismissively and leaned back again. "I don't care what your little app says. Maybe try economy? You'll fit in better back there." Silence fell over the nearby rows. A woman in 3B looked up from her book. A man with earbuds in one row back paused his podcast and slowly pulled one earbud out. Michelle's fingers gripped her phone tighter. She remained calm. "Sir, I'm not asking for trouble. But this is my assigned seat, and I'd appreciate it if you'd move." He gave a long sigh, clearly annoyed. "Are you seriously going to cause a scene over a seat? Come on, sweetheart. It's not that deep." That was when a nearby flight attendant hurried over, her face tense with forced cheer. "Hi there. Is everything all right here?" she asked, already glancing nervously between the two. Before Michelle could respond, the man jumped in. "This woman is trying to take my seat. I don't know what the problem is." Michelle raised her hand calmly. "I have the ticket. Seat 2A. This is my assigned seat. I checked in early, and I boarded with Group 1. The flight attendant smiled tightly. "Ma'am, if there's some confusion, we can settle it quietly in the back, okay? Why don't we step into coach and sort this out?" Michelle blinked. She stared at the attendant, then at the man still sprawled in her seat. "You want me to move?" she asked, voice still low. "Even though I have the proof right here?" The attendant's eyes flicked toward the boarding pass. "We can deal with that later, but for now, please don't hold up the line. Just go with me to the back and we'll figure it out." Michelle didn't move. She wasn't rude. She wasn't loud. She just stood there, tall, proud, composed. Respectfully, she said, "I'm not going anywhere. You haven't even asked him to show his boarding pass." Now a few more heads were turning. Someone started filming. Another whispered to a companion, "This is about to go viral." The man in 2A scoffed again. "Why don't you quit the act? You're obviously trying to get a free upgrade or something." "It's not working." Michelle's jaw tightened. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just looked directly at the attendant and said, "I'm the CEO of Novatech. I booked this seat a week ago, flew in from New York for a keynote, and now I'm being told to move, while this man gets the benefit of the doubt. Why is that?" The attendant's smile faltered. Around them, the mood shifted. Row by row, it became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a moment, and everyone was watching to see how it would unfold. The man adjusted his sunglasses and muttered under his breath, "These people always think they're important." Michelle's phone was already recording, held at her side. Quiet. Steady. Proof. She took a breath and said clearly, "If this seat is not returned to its rightful passenger, I'll be filing a formal complaint. And you'll have the video to go along with it. No yelling. No anger. Just truth. And power." The flight attendant turned pale. She called for a supervisor. The man in 2A began to fidget. And just like that, the balance of power began to shift. The flight attendant didn't ask the man for his ticket. She didn't even glance in his direction. Instead, she turned to Michelle, calm, professional, still standing in the narrow aisle of first class, and said, "Ma'am, if there's been a mistake, please let's handle this quietly in the back." Michelle blinked. She thought she'd misheard. "Excuse me," she asked, voice low and firm. The attendant gave a customer service smile, the kind that's meant to soothe but never quite does. "Let's not hold up the boarding process," she continued. "If there's an issue, we can deal with it once everyone is seated. For now, I'm going to have to ask you to move to the back of the plane." Michelle raised a single eyebrow. That's all it took. "Handle what?" she asked, her voice measured but strong. "This is my assigned seat. I booked it days ago." She lifted her phone and turned the screen toward the flight attendant. Bold letters. Clear as day. Seat 2A. First class. Michelle Carter. The attendant glanced, barely. Not enough to even read the name. "Ma'am," she repeated, this time slightly firmer, "we'll sort it out after takeoff if needed. But for now, you're going to have to move." Michelle didn't move. She didn't argue. She just stood there. Composed. Grounded. Powerful. "I'm not moving," she said quietly. "This is my seat. And I paid for it." A hush spread through the first-class cabin. Behind her, someone muttered, "Unbelievable." And from the seat, her seat, the man huffed dramatically. "Is she really going to make a scene over a seat?" he scoffed. "Just take another one. It's not like she belongs here anyway." Michelle heard that. Every word. And yet, she didn't explode. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into her purse, pulled out her phone. And hit record. Calm. Silent. Steady. She aimed the camera downward, framing the seat number, her face, the boarding pass on her phone screen, and the flight attendant standing just off to the side. "Miss, you can't record on the plane," the attendant snapped quickly, suddenly more alert. "I can if I'm being denied service that I paid for," Michelle replied without flinching. "And I can definitely record if I'm being treated differently." The words "treated differently" hung in the air like thunder. Everyone knew what she meant. The man in the seat folded his arms across his chest and rolled his eyes. "Oh great, here comes the race card." Michelle didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on the flight attendant. "Are you really going to let this man sit here," she asked quietly, "without checking his ticket, while you force me to leave the seat I paid for?" The flight attendant didn't answer. Not right away. Around them, passengers began watching more openly. Phones were lifted, some recording, some pretending to check emails while secretly filming. The murmurs grew. Someone whispered, "She's right." Another voice said, "This is messed up." And then someone said exactly what Michelle had been waiting for. "Wait, is that Michelle Carter from Novatech?" A few heads turned faster now. Someone pulled out their phone and started Googling. Michelle Carter. CEO. Novatech. One of the most powerful tech executives in the country. Not just a passenger. Not just a woman. Not just black. But a leader who built a billion-dollar company from the ground up, and she was being asked to give up her seat without cause. The attendant's fake smile was gone now. Her posture stiffened. She fumbled with her tablet, pretending to check something. Michelle lowered her phone for a second and said, "If this seat isn't rightfully returned, I will be contacting my legal team and filing a complaint against this airline." On video. With timestamps. Still calm. Still not raising her voice. But everyone could hear it now, she wasn't backing down. The flight attendant mumbled, "Let me speak to a supervisor." She turned and walked away in a hurry, heels clicking down the aisle like thunder. Michelle sat down in the open space beside the man. Not in defeat, but to reclaim her ground, her right, her place. She didn't say another word to him. She simply looked out the window, still holding her phone, still recording. The tension in the cabin was thick. But Michelle? She was unmoved. Because when you've earned your seat at the table, or in this case, on the plane, you don't let anyone take it from you. A second flight attendant approached, her expression less rehearsed, more serious. Moments later, the supervisor arrived. She was older, with a clipboard tucked under one arm, her eyes scanning the situation like she was already behind schedule. Now, the tone shifted. Passengers in first class had stopped pretending not to notice. Phones were raised. Voices lowered into whispers. The man still sitting in seat 2A, Michelle's rightful seat, looked annoyed by the attention. His cool demeanor started to crack. With his sunglasses still on, he muttered under his breath, "She probably snuck up here for the view." Michelle turned her head slowly, face composed. She didn't rise to the bait. She didn't glare. She simply looked him in the eye and replied with quiet authority, "I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 tech company. And I'm not here for the view. I'm here because I earned this seat." That sentence stopped everyone. The supervisor paused mid-note. The flight attendants stiffened. Even the man in 2A seemed caught off guard. Just a few rows back, a passenger leaned toward his seatmate. "Wait. Did she say CEO?" Someone from row 3C whispered louder, "That's Michelle Carter. From Novatech. Look her up." Whispers turned into stares. Phones came alive. Screens lit up with search results. A Google image. Forbes cover. Michelle Carter, tech mogul. Speaker. Innovator. The man who'd claimed her seat looked suddenly very small. He fidgeted with his collar, leaned forward as if trying to stay invisible behind his own entitlement. The second flight attendant glanced toward the supervisor, uncertainty now visible on her face. This wasn't just a seating issue anymore. It was about how the airline was handling it publicly. Michelle remained seated beside the man, not in surrender, but in power. She wasn't budging. She was letting the truth and the facts speak for her. And then, she spoke again. 7 words that sliced through the tension like a blade. "Would you like me to call CNN?" The air snapped. It was as if someone had turned up the volume on reality. Gasps echoed through the rows. A woman 3 seats behind her said, "Oh no, she didn't." But she did. And she meant it. Michelle wasn't bluffing. She didn't have to. Her influence was real. Her network was vast. She'd been interviewed by every major outlet in the country, CNN, Forbes, Bloomberg, Fast Company. And now, she was being treated like an imposter in a seat she bought, while the man who couldn't produce a boarding pass still lounged like royalty. The supervisor straightened up. She cleared her throat. Her voice was less scripted now, more careful. "Ms. Carter. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. We'll be verifying all seating assignments immediately." Michelle replied without turning her head. "I already showed my boarding pass. Multiple times. The only person who hasn't is him." She gestured, just slightly, to the man still clinging to 2A. The supervisor turned to him, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, do you have your boarding pass?" He didn't speak. He reached into his blazer pocket, pulled out a crumpled slip of paper, and handed it over. The supervisor unfolded it. Scanned it. Checked again. Her face went pale. "Sir, this seat is not yours," she said. "You're in 19C. Economy." Boom. There it was. The truth. Confirmed. A few people clapped quietly. One man let out a slow whistle. Another shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." Still, the man stayed seated. "I'm not moving until someone makes me," he grumbled. Michelle didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Because moments later, the captain appeared. Not a junior pilot. Not a co-pilot. The captain himself. He stepped into first class, his expression unreadable. But the moment he saw Michelle, he paused. Recognition dawned. He'd clearly heard what was happening. "Ms. Carter," he said respectfully, "I understand there's been an issue with your seat. Please rest assured, we're handling it now." He turned to the man and said with authority, "Sir, you will need to return to your assigned seat immediately or deplane." There was no room left for arrogance. The man stood up in silence. He didn't look at Michelle. He didn't look at anyone. Just grabbed his bag and shuffled down the aisle like a shadow shrinking in the light. Michelle quietly slid into seat 2A, her rightful place, and looked out the window. No smile. No gloating. Just calm power. The cabin seemed to exhale. The captain offered one more respectful nod and returned to the cockpit. Michelle turned off her camera and opened her laptop. The flight crew didn't ask her for anything else. They didn't even bring it up. They just brought her a drink. On the house. I think we should speak to the pilot. Michelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't wave her arms or make a scene. But the moment those 7 words left her lips, the entire mood on the plane shifted. She spoke them with the calm, commanding tone of someone who wasn't asking for justice, she was demanding it. And more importantly, she expected it. The supervisor's confident stance faltered. Her clipboard lowered. She looked around, uncertain. Michelle locked eyes with her and continued, steady and direct, either he shows his boarding pass, or I'll be filing a formal discrimination claim. And I have everything on video. She didn't have to raise her phone again. Everyone already knew it was recording. The blinking red light spoke louder than any shout. The supervisor hesitated. Her professionalism cracked just slightly as she turned toward the man still lounging in seat 2A, legs crossed, posture smug, like he owned the entire row. Sir, she said carefully, may I see your boarding pass, please? The man didn't even blink. Lost it. The word hit like a thud. The supervisor stood frozen for a moment. Behind her, one of the attendants looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Someone in row 3 muttered, lost it? Really? Another whispered, that excuse wouldn't work for anyone else on this plane. Michelle said nothing. She didn't have to. Because at that moment, the crew called for the pilot. And when he stepped out of the cockpit, the temperature in the cabin dropped a few degrees. He was tall, middle-aged, sharp uniform, cool authority written all over his face. But the moment he entered the first-class cabin and took in the scene, Michelle standing tall, the supervisor looking flustered, the man reclining without a pass, his expression changed. His brow furrowed. Michelle turned to him, calm and collected as ever. Captain, she said, her voice level and respectful, my name is Michelle Carter. I purchased seat 2A. I checked in early and boarded with Group 1. But I was asked, multiple times, to leave my seat without any verification. This man, she gestured toward him, refuses to show his boarding pass. And yet, I was the one told to move. The pilot looked to his crew. Why wasn't her boarding pass checked first? Silence. No one answered. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, pretending to recheck her notes. The attendants exchanged awkward glances. No one had a good explanation. Then the pilot turned to the man in the seat. Sir, do you have your boarding pass with you? The man paused. He glanced around, realizing the attention had fully turned on him now. The whispering had stopped. The cameras had stopped hiding. He cleared his throat. I told them I lost it. The pilot's expression hardened. That's not acceptable. We require all passengers to present valid documentation when there's a seating issue. Especially in first class. The man sat up straighter. Look, it's just a seat. I got tired of waiting in the back, figured I'd ride up here. What's the big deal? The entitlement in his voice was deafening. Michelle, still holding her phone, didn't react. She just watched. Observing. Documenting. The pilot looked back to the crew. Did no one think to check his assigned seat? More silence. A few more phones came out. The captain took a step forward, voice firm and final. Sir, you are not assigned to this seat. If you do not return to your designated place immediately, you will be removed from the flight. Now, the tension broke. Gasps. A few quiet cheers from the back. Someone near the front muttered, finally. The man stood up slowly, no longer cocky. No longer in control. He snatched his carry-on from the overhead bin and shuffled toward the back of the plane, his face red with embarrassment. He didn't say a word as he passed Michelle. He couldn't even look at her. The captain turned to her. Ms. Carter, he said sincerely, on behalf of the airline, I apologize. You were right to stand your ground. Michelle nodded. Thank you, Captain. She took her seat, her rightful seat, without fanfare. She didn't smile or gloat. She simply opened her laptop and began reviewing her notes. The flight was delayed by 10 minutes. But no one seemed to mind. Because everyone on that plane had just witnessed something bigger than a seat dispute. They'd seen dignity in action. Discrimination exposed. And a woman who refused to be moved because she knew exactly what she was worth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're pausing boarding temporarily. The pilot's voice came over the cabin speakers, calm but firm, carrying an unmistakable weight. The hum of the boarding process stopped instantly. A ripple of reactions spread through the plane. Some gasped. Others groaned, checking their watches or muttering under their breath. But then came the unexpected sound. A small round of applause from a few passengers in first class. It started soft, then picked up as more people realized what had just happened. The man who had taken seat 2A, Michelle Carter's seat, was finally standing. But not by choice. A uniformed ground staff member had quietly entered the plane moments before, summoned by the captain. Now, that same man who once smirked with arrogance was grabbing his carry-on and being escorted down the aisle. His face was flushed. His eyes were downcast. Still, he muttered as he passed the seated passengers, "Unbelievable. This is reverse discrimination. All because of privilege, entitlement," but no one answered him. No one defended him. And Michelle? She said nothing. She didn't gloat. She didn't clap back. She simply turned and slid into seat 2A, her rightful seat, with graceful silence. Her body language spoke louder than any victory speech. This was never about revenge. It was about respect. As the man disappeared down the jet bridge, the tension in the cabin seemed to lift. Conversations restarted. Phones were lowered. A few passengers exchanged nods with Michelle as she settled in. Then, a quiet moment that said everything. The captain himself stepped out from the cockpit again, not because protocol demanded it, but because decency did. He walked up to her row and stopped just beside her seat. "Ms. Carter," he said with sincerity, "on behalf of this airline, I want to offer you a personal apology. You should never have been put in that position. We appreciate your patience and the professional way you handled it." Michelle looked up, meeting his eyes. "Thank you, Captain. I hope this situation helps ensure no one else has to go through that again." He nodded solemnly. "It already has." As he returned to the cockpit, a nearby passenger leaned over from the opposite row, a woman in her early 30s, wide-eyed and clearly impressed. She whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "You handled that like a boss." Michelle smiled without turning her head. "That's because I am one." The woman let out a small laugh, and several others chuckled softly. It wasn't just humor, it was relief. The whole plane had witnessed something uncomfortable. But they'd also witnessed something empowering. Michelle didn't lose control. She didn't need to. She had truth, proof, and presence on her side. By the time the plane finally pushed back from the gate, it was only about 15 minutes behind schedule. But something had shifted, not just in the plane's position on the runway, but in the minds of everyone on board. Michelle pulled out her laptop, placed her earbuds in, and quietly resumed reviewing slides for an upcoming keynote. She had bigger things ahead: investor meetings, a board presentation, and a global tech summit next week. This moment was just a detour. And yet, it would soon travel further than any destination on her itinerary. That video, the one she recorded quietly in the aisle, the one she never planned to share, was posted later that evening by another passenger. It showed her calm refusal. Her quiet courage. Her unwavering professionalism in the face of discrimination. And within 24 hours, it went viral. 5 million views. Then 10 million. Hashtag Michelle Carter trended across platforms. People weren't just shocked by what happened. They were inspired by how she responded. No yelling. No name-calling. No spectacle. Just a black woman who knew her worth and refused to be moved, literally and figuratively. In a world where the loudest voices often get the most attention, Michelle Carter became a symbol of something different: strength without shouting. Power without ego. Leadership without apology. And to the millions watching online, and the dozens who watched in person that day, the message was clear: this wasn't just about a seat. It never was. It wasn't just about where Michelle Carter was supposed to sit for the next 3 hours. It wasn't about window versus aisle, first class versus coach, comfort versus inconvenience. This moment, this confrontation, was about something far deeper. It was about what happens when someone is automatically assumed not to belong. Not because of what they did. Not because of how they acted. But because of how they looked. Because she was a woman. Because she was black. Because she didn't fit someone else's idea of what a first-class passenger looked like. And yet, Michelle Carter didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She didn't demand respect, she modeled it. She stood in truth. With proof. With poise. And most of all, with that quiet power that comes from knowing exactly who you are. No one saw her coming. Because the world still often underestimates women like Michelle, intelligent, composed, unshakably self-assured. But what the world fails to see, it learns to respect. That day, Michelle taught everyone on that plane and millions online a lesson they'll never forget. Green circle respect isn't about appearances. It's about action. After the confrontation ended and the man who'd stolen her seat was removed, the plane finally prepared for takeoff. The mood on board was different. Quieter. More aware. The pilot made a quick announcement. "Thank you for your patience, folks. We're now ready for departure." 20 minutes later, the wheels lifted off the runway. And just like that, the moment passed. But its impact didn't. Michelle didn't spend the rest of the flight stewing or celebrating. She didn't gloat or vent. She simply opened her laptop, slipped in her earbuds, and began reviewing a proposal she'd be pitching to investors the next morning. Business as usual. Because for her, this was just a moment, not a distraction, not a defeat, not even a victory. Just a reminder that even at 35,000 feet, there's always another level to rise to. Meanwhile, in row 5, a young girl traveling with her mother leaned over and whispered, "Mommy, I want to be like her." Her mother smiled. "Me too, baby. Me too." As the flight neared its destination, something unexpected happened. Phones began buzzing. Screens lit up. People on board were watching it happen in real time. Someone had uploaded the video, the footage of Michelle calmly explaining her case, the way she recorded the injustice, the grace she maintained throughout. By the time the wheels touched down, the clip had already hit 2 million views. It wasn't just going viral. It was becoming a movement. Comments poured in, "This is how you stand your ground." She didn't need to yell. Her presence said everything. "More women like her, please." Now that's a CEO. News outlets picked it up within hours. Hashtag Michelle Carter trended worldwide. Think pieces. Reaction videos. Panels discussing race, power, professionalism. And Michelle? She didn't post it. She didn't tweet about it. She didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. And the man who took her seat? Well, he learned something that day, too. Something that might stay with him longer than the embarrassment, longer than the video, longer than the headlines. He learned that entitlement without integrity will always be exposed. He learned that assumptions can cost you more than comfort, they can cost you character. And above all, he learned to never underestimate the power of a woman who knows her worth. Direct hit final takeaway for your audience. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone tries to put you in the wrong seat in life, remember this: you don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. You just need to stand in your truth. With your proof. And in your power. Because when you know your worth, the world has no choice but to recognize it. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about how we treat one another, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories that matter. Your support helps us bring truth, dignity, and inspiration to screens around the world. See you in the next video.